Welcome to the first edition of the Mainly Hoops Best Bets podcast. This is episode 13 of the podcast, but the first edition now of Best Bets. And this is something we're going to look to continue throughout the season, just to give some different content to supplement some of the articles that we're putting out about the best bets. And it'll give us a chance to break down some of these games for those of you that are looking to place some bets and hear our thoughts on which way we might be leaning in some of these games. So we're going to take a look this week at, as we talked about in our last episode, the Big Ten or the Big East Big 12 Challenge and the ACC SEC Challenge, which is starting up tomorrow. So jumping right into it, we've got some pretty key games, some interesting games tomorrow. Starting with Michigan at Wisconsin. Wisconsin getting 3.5 points here at home.
Yeah, it's the start of like early conference play. The Big Ten starting up this week, and along with the Mountain West as well. But the Big Ten has some more marquee matchups. But as for this game, it's two pretty even teams. Just Wisconsin's getting about 3.5 here for home court. I think the number's in a fairly decent spot. I'd make it closer to -4 to -4.5 for Wisconsin here, just because I think they're the slightly better team in this spot. But both teams, they've exceeded expectations so far. Michigan's been surprisingly good to start, but they've also had a lot of turnover issues, which is a little bit surprising out of a team that has a lot of good guards. And it's mostly been, it's been a little bit from Danny Wolf as well. He's turned the ball over a ton, along with Roddy Gale. They've been, maybe it's a continuity issue, but that's just somewhere where they've kind of struggled so far in this game. But Wisconsin's not really going to be able to exploit that area, as they're a pretty conservative defense. And so, yeah, overall, it's a pretty even game, I would say. But Big Ten home court means so much this early in the year that I guess I would lean Wisconsin's way a little bit here. But the matchup probably favors Michigan, just because they're not really going to get bothered too much by Wisconsin. That's really their only weakness in this game. But yeah, overall, if I had to make a bet, I'd bet Wisconsin, just because of the home court early in the year.
Yeah. Now this isn't a game that you're betting yourself, right? This is just
this is more of just a thought on a bigger game that we have here, just in case anyone wanted to have some action on it. I would lean to Wisconsin. Probably wouldn't recommend betting it at this point in time. Maybe if it creeps down to 1.5 or 1, I think that would be it being a little bit too out of hand there. And then, I would definitely make a bet on Wisconsin at like 1.
Yeah. Michigan, they need to bounce back here, right? New coach, not just bounce back in this game against the quality opponent, but bounce back this season after their woeful season last year. I think they won only 2 conference games last year or something like that.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I was pretty high on that team coming into the year, and it just turned into a complete
and it just went dumpster fire. Juwan Howard out of there.
Doug McDaniel only playing home games. It was a little bit weird. It was like an academic issue, but they just had everything going on. And Dusty May is a great coach, and I'm sure they'll figure out the turnover issues as they play together a bit more. And like, I have both of these teams like top 5 in the Big Ten, so it should be like a really good matchup to start Big Ten play.
Yeah, crazy. We're already starting Big Ten play. Feels like we were just starting the season up. I guess it was a month ago now, but still pretty crazy. So anyway,
I'm not sure how much of a fan I am of the early conference play. I kind of like it just being all non-con, and then everyone goes into their own world in conference play, and then they all meet up again in March. But maybe it's good to get a little bit of a taste of the conference play early and then dive back into non-con. But it's more just preference, I think.
Yeah, I'm more of the belief that conference play should start after Christmas. That's just once Christmas is gone, New Year's, and then we jump into conference play. Right? Let everyone kind of battle it out in the non-conference before Christmas, and then dive into it. And like you said, let everyone go into their own world and see them back again in March.
Yeah, and it's really only the Big Ten and the ACC that do it, right? Like the Big 12 doesn't really start till the start of the new year. SEC doesn't do any early stuff like that. So it's pretty much just Big Ten, ACC that like to dabble in it a little bit early because I think the ACC starts up this weekend. I think Saturday they have some conference games going.
Yeah, yeah. Now, as we mentioned, the SEC ACC challenge is this week, and with that, we have Kentucky at Clemson tomorrow night. Kentucky, the road favorite here by 2.5.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite spots of the season, honestly, so far. And definitely my favorite bet of tomorrow would be taking the points with Clemson, getting 2.5 here. I think this would be buying Kentucky at their highest point if you were to bet on them here. This is their first true road game of the season as well. And I think they've been pretty fortunate on the defensive end. We've talked about how that's kind of how they won the game against Duke, was with Duke just not shooting the ball well. I believe they went like 4 for 24 from three. So, but I mean, the defense is good. They have good perimeter assets there, but I think the defense is like a little bit over its head right now. And they've beat up on bye game competition outside of that one game against Duke, where I thought they were handled for a decent amount of the game. So they're due for major shooting regression on the defensive end. Teams are only shooting 25% from three against them right now. And so that's not really sustainable. They do a decent job of limiting catch and shoot opportunities, but I just don't see it. Like 25% isn't really sustainable for anyone unless you're like the elite of the elites and you have a kind of an outlier season. But yeah, and Clemson on the offensive side should have an advantage on the interior going through their post-up game with Ian Shefflin and Victor Locken. I think they can have a lot of success there because Kentucky's not going to double. They like to limit those catch and shoot opportunities. So I think guys like Shefflin against Andrew Carr could kind of have a field day. And maybe at some point Kentucky will be forced to double, and that'll lead to some open shots for Clemson. And, Clemson can also keep Kentucky out of transition. And that's kind of what they've been living off this year, especially against this bye game competition. They've been able to force some turnovers against those teams and get out and run. They haven't really been slowed down all that much this year in the half court. And if you're going to have to do that for the first time on the road, I think it's going to be a really tough time against a team like Clemson that always values keeping the game in the half court, not letting you get out and run under Brad Brownell. So, yeah, and doing it with a brand new roster as well, going on the road for the first time, being overvalued in my opinion, even though this is a team that I was high on coming into the year. I just can't really get to Kentucky being a road favorite here. I'd probably have this closer to a pick. So yeah, I'll take the 2.5 with Clemson.
Yeah, I think what you brought up about Kentucky's transition game is going to be a really key factor here because they really thrived in transition against Duke, especially in the second half, even off made baskets. And in this game, I expect Clemson to limit that. And who knows how Kentucky will play when they have to play a lot of strictly half-court offense, right? Like Duke, one of their downfalls thus far has been their transition defense. That's been kind of the weak spot of their defense. So Kentucky took advantage of that. And I don't think it's going to be quite as easy on the road at Clemson, who's playing great basketball right now. And as you mentioned, Ian Shiflin's been awesome. He was, one of my players of the week last week. So I'm with you on this one. I think Clemson, as we talked about in our episode earlier today, I think Clemson comes in and gets the job done.
Yeah, and I think Chase Hunter and Jaden Zachary are a pretty underrated backcourt too. I think they can absolutely compete with the backcourt group of Kentucky with like guys like Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson, who really haven't been all that great to start the year. So I think they can match those guys shot for shot. And yeah, just fading this Kentucky team that's riding super high right now. I think their analytical profile has been boosted by playing these bye games, and they're just so good in those situations because they have so much depth. Like the guys that they're bringing at the end of the bench when they're up 30, they're bringing in 4 stars, and they're keeping in guys that like Ansley Almanor, who averaged like 16 points a game last year at his mid-major that he was at. It escapes me the team right now, but like when they're playing guys that have had extremely successful college careers or 4-star recruits, they're playing them in those garbage minutes. Like they're obviously going to boost their analytical profile against a mid-major team that just is bringing their bench in, and they just end up getting smacked for an entire 40 minutes instead of 30. So I don't really think that's being accounted for in this number. And like Clemson's a team that I think is undervalued at this point in the year.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure. Now, I know a couple games that you are going to be on. Georgia Tech at Oklahoma tomorrow. Another ACC SEC battle. Weird to say that with Oklahoma being in the SEC now. It just doesn't really feel right. They should be in that Big East Big 12 battle, but nonetheless, here they are. They find themselves in the ACC SEC battle this year at home, coming off that battle for Atlantis title last week. 3 hard-fought games, and now they have Georgia Tech coming into their gym.
Yeah, and that's why I like Georgia Tech here. Getting 10.5, I believe there's like some 11 and a half out there now. So I'll obviously take more points that if I can get them. But yeah, they're coming off 3 hard-fought games at the Battle for Atlantis where they won each game by like single digits, I believe. I think they were all 5-point wins or less. It's another buy low, sell high here. But Oklahoma's been another team that's been fortunate defending the 3-point line. They're giving up an even higher volume than Kentucky, and nobody's making any shots against them right now. Against it's a perimeter defense that I don't really love. I think they've been a little bit better than I expected them coming into the season. But I think guards at Georgia Tech, like Nathan George and JV McCollum, who was at Oklahoma last year, I think they can have a lot of success against this perimeter group that isn't really all that good. And Oklahoma's interior isn't going to be able to bully Georgia Tech's front line that is a little bit smaller. Like guys like Jalen Moore and Sam Godwin aren't going to have a field day because they aren't like the greatest interior scorers. And mostly here, it's mostly a letdown spot for Oklahoma. Like you're coming off 3 extremely tough games in Atlantis, and then you have to come home and play a team that's been like they've been way worse than expectations so far. Like they have a loss to North Florida, and then they got blown out twice at home. Granted, it was against quality competition in Georgia and Cincinnati, but this is a game that Georgia Tech's really going to want. They need to boost their resume somehow. They probably still believe that they're an at-large team, and it was a team I was a bit higher on. So I'm willing to buy low here in this spot against Oklahoma, who could be sleepwalking, especially early in the game.
Yeah, Oklahoma here. They played Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week. 3 tough games. Turnaround, probably didn't practice again until Sunday. Practiced yesterday, today, and now got to play again tomorrow. And you have a team coming in that, like you said, hasn't really performed up to expectations yet. 2 good guards and a solid team that we both thought would be a little bit better. So I think 10.5 is a big number, especially for an Oklahoma team that we weren't really that high on to begin with, right? Maybe higher than than the national media, but overall not super high on Oklahoma. And so 10.5, regardless of who they're playing a Power 5 team. I think 10.5 is a little steep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just the fact that like literally no one's making shots against them. It's making them look a lot better than I think that they actually are. Like I am going to give them more credit, obviously, for that run that they made in the Battle for Atlantis. Like you're not just going to luck your way into winning that kind of tournament, but I'm kind of just willing to fade this guard group that's probably playing a little bit over its head at this point in time. And yeah, Georgia Tech can absolutely score with them, even if the defense hasn't been all that great to start the year.
Yeah. Now another game tomorrow. We have Princeton at St. Joe's. Princeton plus 5.5.
Yeah, I like Princeton here. You kind of buy low on Princeton here, and I really like when Mitch Henderson is an underdog. He's been great in this spot throughout his career. He's 27-11 against the spread when he's getting 5.5 or more points, and that's exactly what we're getting here. And the trend checks out. Like his teams like to play slow and execute in the half court. It's a really it's a tough offense to get a grasp on, like especially on fairly short notice. It's just a lot of cuts. Like I mean, obviously everyone knows about the Princeton offense. It's one of the more mainstream offenses that people like to talk about.
Everyone runs it. Everyone runs it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of cutting actions in the half court, and it can lead to also can lead to a ton of open threes, which is what Mitch Henderson likes to get, and St. Joe's will allow that action. Granted, St. Joe's has played this Princeton team a few times, so they might have a better grasp on how to defend this type of offense. But yeah, Princeton, I think they just haven't had a great start to the year, and it's a good spot to buy them. St. Joe's can kind of play into Princeton's hands. Like Princeton doesn't really have a center on this roster, but they're not really going to take advantage of them on the interior. St. Joe's likes to get out into their transition game and take a ton of 3-point shots. And like Princeton's going to be able to shut down the transition game. Like they're just like Clemson. They like to completely shut that down, force a game into the half court, and kind of just see who the better half court offense is going to be in the game. And I think Mitch Henderson believes in his offense to get it done. I don't necessarily love getting 5.5, so I'm probably going to wait for a better number. I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit of action here on St. Joe's because the line does seem a little bit short. If it gets to 6 or 6.5, that's where I'll end up buying.
Yeah. Now another game tomorrow for me that I'm taking a deep look at is Arkansas at Miami. Both teams not really playing great basketball. Miami's lost 4 in a row now to Drake, Oklahoma State, VCU, and then on Saturday to Charleston Southern, which was a horrific loss. And Arkansas is on the road here, another ACC SEC challenge game, and Arkansas is -5. This just to me feels like a good spot. We were a little bit higher on Miami coming in. I think they're more talented than what they've shown. I think they're a better team than what they've shown. I think this is a spot. Arkansas hasn't played great basketball. I think this is a spot where not necessarily Miami's going to win, but it's going to be a tough game, tight game at home, a game that they should be up for after losing the way that they did on Saturday. And Arkansas is going to be up too, right? They lost over the weekend, and so they're going to be motivated for this game too. I just think that Miami, after the loss that they had to Charleston Southern, and they've lost 4 in a row, like Arkansas is still 5-2, right? They're not 3-4 like Miami with a couple pretty bad losses, especially considering the team that Miami was supposed to be and the moves that they made. So I look for Miami here to bounce back, maybe not with a win, but a close loss and cover that 5.
Yeah, I don't know if I can completely get there with Miami. That defense looks very bad right now. They're not forcing turnovers like a Coach L team typically likes to do. And that guard group just doesn't really look all that great right now. But Arkansas hasn't figured out their offense either. So that'll definitely be an interesting game. I think Miami can match Arkansas on the glass with Lynn Kidd and Brandon Johnson and Matthew Cleveland. So I think they can be okay in that area. And I definitely think you're buying low on Miami, obviously, here. Yeah, and they had some injuries against Charleston Southern too. Like Nigel Pack or Cleveland didn't play in that game. So I think that loss looks a little bit worse than it actually is. Granted, like you're a 25-point favorite. Like you should probably get the job done with anybody on the roster. But yeah, I'm not going to quite get there with Miami, but I would say that's the right side as far as like value on the number.
Yeah. I that's kind of where I'm at. I just think that it's a good spot to buy on Miami if you want some action on this game. They're a much better team, I think, than what they've played so far, and I think that eventually they'll figure it out. Whether or not it will be too late for them remains to be seen. Now,
I agree.
Now Wednesday we have a slate of much better games. We got the Big 12 Big East Challenge with Baylor at UConn. UConn, as we harped on in our previous episode, they really need this. This is a must win, really, after their 3 straight losses last week one to a Colorado team who is losing at home as 15-point favorites at halftime to Pacific right now. So they need this one. They need this one bad. And, Baylor's shown its flaws, but they've also shown the ability to beat some solid teams. So UConn is definitely this is not going to be a walk in the park for them. They're not just going to be able to flip the switch on like they've been able to in years past and show up and win this game.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely like a UConn bounce back here. I think the hate's gotten a little, out of control here. I think a lot of their struggles came because they're a bit unfortunate from three. Like the interior defense still looks really good. Torvik spread here is projected UConn -3. I would be shocked if we had -3 here. I think it's closer to like a UConn -4.5 to 5. I still think UConn's the better team. But yeah, I do like a UConn bounce back here. This offense is still elite, and they can expose a Baylor defense that we've talked about a lot. We're not super high on. Baylor's not going to be able to play zone here in this matchup, and if they play man, I think they get carved up on the interior, just like they have against all of the other elite competition that they played. And yeah, the Huskies defense just people are saying it's a bad defense, and yeah, they had some flaws. They have more flaws than they had last year. They're fouling way more often, but yeah, they've been like every team shot over 50% from three against them in Maui. Like it's not something that's sustainable, and they try their best to cut teams off of the 3-point line and force you into the mid-range area and into the interior where they still have Horace Reed and Samson Johnson, who are really good rim protectors, and I think people are giving them a little bit too much hate. And yeah, so in this spot, I would bet UConn probably up to 5.5, maybe even 6. I think it's just a super motivation spot, especially for this defense that is getting a lot of hate at this point in time.
Yeah. Now, I think part of the 3-point issues for the UConn defense just stem from the Maui rim merchant, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is from Tyrese Hunter. Didn't he go like 5 for 7 in that game?
Oh yeah.
Might have been better than that. I think he went like 7 for 10.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever it was, he hurt their 3-point defense for sure. So I'm with you. I think UConn bounces back, and like I said earlier, if they don't win this game, Dan Hurley might not make it another day. He's not going to sleep until they win again. So, and the players might not either. They might be running stairs until they win again. So, I feel for those players. They probably had a rough weekend of practice, but they're definitely going to want to get this one.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely gonna need this game, or else it's going to be a long rest of the season. Probably. I mean, who would have thought that UConn would have been sitting at 4-4 if they go down in this game on Wednesday?
Yeah, for sure. Now, Alabama, as we mentioned, in kind of that gauntlet part of their schedule, traveling to North Carolina. This game projects to be North Carolina -1. And that's, I think, the side that both of us would be on.
Yeah, I'd be on them -1, but I'm not sure we get this number either, honestly. I think we get it closer to 3, maybe 3.5, just because of the Reitzel injury. But it is massive, especially in the short term. They have to play more Holloway. Like, he's going to have to play way bigger minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if he got to 30 to 32 minutes in this game. And, I don't know if it's a great matchup for him here, just having to guard these North Carolina guards that are so quick. He's probably going to be matched up with a guy like, he'll probably end up on Trimble. And I don't think that's a great matchup. He'll be able to blow by him all day long. And Alabama doesn't want to send help into the lane. Like I think they're just going to allow Trimble to try to get as many buckets at the rim as he can and kind of cut off the 3-point line. That's what Alabama has kind of always done as a defense. Alabama could have a big day on the glass if Amori can stay on the floor for longer than 25 minutes or even stay out of foul trouble. But yeah, UNC's done a good job of drawing fouls, and that started with Trimble. So Cliff Amori is going to be tested here as well. Yeah, I think we've talked about Bama's spacing not being that great, and Reitzel going down just adds even more to that. And the fact that they have to go on the road after a long week. UNC had a long week as well, but their week ended on Wednesday, and they've had a lot of time, and they're going to have a lot of time to prepare for this game. Bama just got done playing on Saturday through their series where they played 3 games in 5 days. So I think there's a little bit of extra prep time for UNC, and that's just an added token here for us to take the Tar Heels. So I would probably only bet them up to 3, but I would absolutely bet it at 1 if that's where it comes out.
Yeah, this is a good chance for them to get back from their loss to Alabama in last year's tournament, where Alabama just lit it up against them. So look for UNC to bounce back from last week's struggles and get a nice quality win at home here. Now, probably the game of the week is Auburn traveling to Duke. Auburn coming off of that win in Maui last week. Duke just played the game against Kansas last week and lost, obviously in a close one, as we talked about in Vegas. So a key game for both teams here. Auburn traveling back from Maui last week, riding high on their tournament victory, and going to Cameron Indoor, one of the toughest places to play in the country.
Yeah, for sure. And Torvik has this game at Duke -5, but I don't see that here at all. I think we'll get it closer to 2.5 or 3, where KenPom has it at. I think people are going to look at that line and say it's a bit crazy to have Auburn as an underdog, but you just got to realize how important home court is. Like Duke's home court is probably worth 4 points. So like if you're calling these teams equals, like Duke should be laying 4 in this game, but I would have Auburn as a slightly better team. So I would probably have this. I'd have the line around -3 or 3.5, and I think that would be the side that I'm looking for. But I think I'd have to be getting a generous number on Duke to even consider betting this game. You know, it is the game of the night, but I probably won't have anything on it. But I do think Duke's athletes across the board can match Auburn, and that isn't something that any other team can say. Maybe besides Houston, but I think Duke's athleticism up front with the 3 at the 3 and the 4 is even better than what Houston has. So I think that'll be a tough matchup for Auburn. And obviously, the hot topic for Duke has been the late game execution, which it may come back to bite them here again. Like they're probably going to be playing a close game. They're going to force Flag into isolation because that's what Auburn does. They don't have to help off anyone. They can throw Chad Baker-Mazara on Flag and say, hey, just go score 30 to 35 on us. Like we're going to kind of dare him to do that, which that could end up being a problem in this game. But at the end of the day, I think Auburn's offense is definitely a bit overvalued, especially at the guard position. And I think Duke's defensive versatility can give this Auburn team a bunch of problems. You know, Duke's finally getting one of these elite teams on their home floor. It's going to be probably the best environment outside of them playing UNC that they get all season long. So that in itself, like early season, like big games, like everyone talks about the top 15 home team trend that I don't really buy into all that much, but I do think it means something earlier in the year. So I would take Duke here, but I'll probably set it out at the number that we're going to get. It's probably going to be around 3, maybe 2.5.
Yeah. Your Cyclones, as we like to call them, they play at home against Marquette. Marquette jumped up into the top 5 in the AP poll this week, so this is a top 5 matchup. So yeah. Nice quality game for Big East, Big 12. Feels like an overvalue spot on Marquette. I know you've been selling them all year, and here we are. They're undefeated still, but this feels like the time to sell on them because they're going to Iowa State, tough place to play, and the spread projects all the way to 6.5.
Yeah, I would like Iowa State here, but I just respect Shaka Smart too much as an underdog. He always gets his team to play up in these situations. I've already been burnt by it once when they went to go play Maryland, and Maryland did Maryland things in big games, and they lost another one. But I still really like that team. But Iowa State, I think they can match Marquette's turnover differential, which is kind of what Marquette's defense lives off. But Iowa State is arguably better in that area. They're 6th nationally in turnover rate on the offensive side. So I think it's going to be really hard for Marquette to get out and create those live ball turnovers where they score like 12 to 14 fast break points a game or just points off turnovers in general. It feels like they do that, 6 or 7 times a game. And Marquette defensively, if they're not going to force turnovers, they're going to need to take away the rim as they always do. But if you're going to take away the rim, you're going to leave open these Iowa State shooters and like Curtis Jones. Gilbert's been a better shooter throughout his career. Milan Momcilovic is a great shooter. Nate Heisey coming in from Northern Iowa is gonna be able to make some shots here in this game. And I also like the front court offense of Iowa State, and I like them on the glass to kind of beat up on this Marquette front court that isn't all that big, and that's kind of their biggest defensive weakness is getting on the defensive glass. We've seen teams like George Mason or even Central Michigan, who was a 27.5 point dog against Marquette, get all over the glass against them and almost beat them. Honestly, it was a single digit loss for Central Michigan. And Iowa State's going to be able to get on the glass arguably more than them. And they might even be able to force some turnovers against this backcourt of Marquette. And that's not something Marquette's used to. And Iowa State's also going to be able to force the ball out of Cam Jones' hands quite a bit here, and force these other Marquette shooters to beat them. And Marquette shooters haven't really proved a ton this year, although Joplin and Ben Gold are starting to shoot it a little bit better. I don't think Stevie Mitchell and Chase Ross are going to be able to hit enough open shots on the road, which they're going to need to do to take this win or even cover this game. So I lean towards Iowa State here, but I'm most likely going to stay off just because there's something about Marquette in the underdog role. Shaka Smart always gets these guys to play up, so I'll probably pass.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to bet against Shaka Smart when he's an underdog, especially if the line ends up being near where it projects at 6.5. But I will say Marquette is not a top 5 team in the country, right?
I have them around 15.
Right, and coming into the year, and maybe this was a little bit, we overlooked them a little bit, but I think we had them 4th in the Big East in our preseason rankings. So to say that they're now a top 5 team in the country versus where we had them at 4th, now maybe we were wrong, but I don't think that they're capable of hanging with these top dogs because they just have so many shortcomings, especially in the front court against some of these top teams, and not outside of Cam Jones. Like those guards, Mitchell and Ross are nice players, but I think against top level guards on opposing teams, they're going to struggle a little bit. So I think if I were to be on this, I would definitely lean the Iowa State side as well, despite Shaka Smart being so good as an underdog. It's just such a tough place to go play. And Iowa State's going to be up for this game, even though, they had a good week last week, even though they lost to Auburn, right? They lost that game. They controlled a decent part of the game, played good basketball, ended up losing at the end on the tip in by Broome. But if that game goes the other way, they're probably the Maui champs, and we're talking about how amazing a week they had. And so, I'm not going to look too much into that. I think that, they're going to be ready to knock off a top 5 team here.
Yeah, I don't think enough people are talking about how good of a week Iowa State had. Like, they were dominating Auburn, and they just kind of gassed out with about 10 minutes to go in that game and ended up losing. But I thought they looked like the better team for more portions of that game. So I still have them as a top 5 team in the country, just like the AP poll does. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in taking Iowa State here, but I'm probably going to stay off it.
Yeah. Now I know you have a couple of best bets on Wednesday. First one being Mississippi State against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I like Mississippi State in this spot. I do really like this Pittsburgh team, but I think they're a little bit overvalued now. They're coming off a big win against Ohio State, but the lack of guard depth here for Pittsburgh is mostly the reason why I'm going to take Mississippi State. And yeah, because they lost Damian Dunn for about 6 weeks. So, and Zach Austin was kind of taking over the role in the Damian Dunn role, and he hit 5 threes in that Ohio State game, but I don't think he's necessarily like this elite shooter that he looked like at Ohio State. So, and yeah, Mississippi State's coming off a tough loss to Butler, but I do think they're undervalued in general. And guys like Claudel Harris, Kanye Clary, and Kugel haven't really made shots yet. So I still think there's a lot more in the tank for the Bulldogs. And I like them -3 is where it's projected. And I think that's probably where it ends up.
Yeah. That backcourt's definitely due for some shooting improvement. Those are, 3 talented guys. So I definitely like the spot for them there. Now the other game that you were on was Maryland against Ohio State, and Maryland should definitely control the front court here. Now, can Maryland win a game that's like a tight spread? We'll see.
Yeah, they better, because I think -2.5 is kind of a criminal number here in this spot. If we end up getting 2.5, maybe the markets have adjusted to Bradshaw not being in the lineup, but I would have this number closer to 6 or 6.5. So even if it's 4.5 or 5, I'd probably still have a bet around 5. But yeah, the front court is going to kill this Ohio State front court. That they had to play Devin Royal and Evan Mahaffey in stretches in the front court, and both of those guys are 6'6". And Julian Reese and Derek Queen should have a monster day, and they love to play through those guys. And Ohio State's not going to have another chance but to double. And Maryland has capable shooters now. It's not last year's Maryland team that couldn't shoot the ball at all. Guys like Gillespie and Rodney Rice have been hitting shots at a high clip, and I think they continue to do that here. And they have perimeter defenders to contain this Ohio State group that has a ton of firepower, but there's a lot of length and versatility on the perimeter of Maryland, and they're going to be able to guard those guys one-on-one, at least contain them. They're not going to completely shut them down. And I do like this game to be a little bit higher scoring, so I think I would take the over. I think it'd be around, I think they have it around like 145, 146. So that's an area I would go as well. But yeah, Maryland's front court should eat them alive. And I think this is a team that's undervalued. And they gave Marquette their best game of the year, like took them down to the wire. And they probably controlled more of that game. And they kind of pissed the game away, just like they like to do in these big spots. But yeah, I like Maryland to win a big game, even though we've seen it so many times that they haven't been able to get it done. But I think this is kind of a new team.
Yeah, Derek Queen's been awesome. So I'm with you. I think that, especially with Bradshaw out, even though I'm not that high on him, I think this is a good spot for Maryland to get a nice Big Ten victory. But as for the next couple days, we've got some great games, plenty of action to put out there. So with that, we've got some articles that will be coming out here in the next day or two. So stay tuned for those. And we're going to be planning to do at least one more of these episodes a week. I think the plan will probably be to do 2 a week. So stay tuned for those. And other than that, we'll see you next time on the Best Bets episode.